One of the most common questions I hear in the Mario Kart Wii community is, what strategies should I go for? Far too often I see players going for strategies that are either way too hard or that are straight up losing them time. This video should hopefully make it clear that you do not need hard strategies to get good times in this game. All of the strats I will show you can be done consistently at a beginner level, but they can still yield very fast times when done well. Hopefully you all can learn a thing or two and apply these strategies to your own time trials. Remember to like and subscribe to support the channel. More time trial content is on the way soon, and with that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, so starting off on Luigi's circuit, basically how this video is going to work is I drove a 3-lap time on every single track in the game using easy strategies, and I'm just going to go ahead and look over these videos and basically give you some pointers based on basically the things you should know if you're a beginner player in this game. So as you can see, we're starting off on Luigi's circuit. You really do not need to be riding the curb on a lot of these turns. You can easily get a 109 just by focusing on a lot of the smaller stuff, and by that I mean just getting a good alignment out of a lot of the turns, getting at least decent chain wheelies. That's always a good place to work on, and as you can see, just getting a somewhat decent shortcut. You do not need the world record bounce cut to get a 109. As you can see, this runs a 110.3, and it has its mistakes in it, and you can certainly improve it without all that much in terms of like the shortcuts basically. So yeah, as you can see, I'm just really focusing on getting a good alignment out of these turns, avoiding excess rehopping. That's going to be where a lot of time save comes from, and as you can see, I'm entering the shortcut pretty wide as well. That's totally fine as long as you make it through, you get out of the cut at top speed. But yeah, that's LC. Okay, so moving on to Moo Moo Meadows, this is the first track where soft drifting is going to be really important. Delay drifting as well, but if you're a beginner, I would say soft drifting is the #1 priority. I'm not here to give you a tutorial on how to soft drift, but I will be linking resources to that below. There are a million things I could touch on, so I'm really going to try and designate a lot of strategies to, or like tutorials, to resources that are better designed for that sort of thing. So check the description for certain strategy guides, especially for soft drifting and delay drifting. But yeah, so entering the shortcut here, it's okay to enter it pretty wide. It is very hard if you're a beginner player to get a good alignment out of the shortcut, especially when I was learning this track. I would very often hit the blue ramp or the fence on the side, but don't be afraid to hold out that MT. It's going to allow you to give you a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to getting that alignment. Should make it a little bit easier. And as you can see, you can still get a pretty decent time without using the low at all. Obviously, I will link a resource down below if you want to learn how to do the low by Arc Intel. He actually suggests going parallel to the ramp. I actually suggest going at a slight left to right angle. That should make it a little bit easier. Last turn can be a problem as well, but that will obviously come with experience. So yeah, that's Moo Moo Meadows. Okay, so we're moving on to Mushroom Gorge now, and I've made separate videos for the glitch and no glitch category. A few other glitches are going to be in this video. Mushroom Gorge just happens to be the first one, so we're starting off on the no glitch category, and I would really recommend you try and get consistent with the gap jump. That's going to be really important for getting to like closer to a 143 level. And if you can do that mushroom skip, I would recommend it. It does get very consistent with time. As long as you just land on the left side of the mushroom, you can just get a wheelie out and you won't have a problem. Similar in this mushroom section, I wouldn't recommend you do a wheelie because it can give like some inconsistent air time if you're not really familiar with how the mushrooms work. So no harm in doing that. Sometimes, like if you add the wheelie, you might end up just falling off the track. So if you're having a problem with that, you don't even have to worry about it. Once you get closer to like a 144 level, 145 I would say, I would start to consider adding the wheelie. You also don't need to do a double MT on this turn like what the world record does, at least with inside drift. Doesn't save all that much time, can be kind of hard, gives you weird bounces sometimes, so no harm in cutting that out. And as for the gap jump, you see I am doing the hopless method. I would recommend doing this. This is what I find to be the easiest way. If you do the hop method, you know, you can add a spin drift. It can make it easy, but I just find the TF input method just gives you a little bit more wiggle room, whereas you kind of need a precise hop timing if you choose to do the hop method. But yeah, with this method you should be able to get close to like a 143 with these strats. Really no reason you couldn't do that. You really will need to optimize the gap jump closer to a 142 and eventually add like the world record method as you approach like a 141. But yeah, that's Mushroom Gorge. Let's go to the glitch now. Okay, moving on to Mushroom Gorge glitch. This is one of the easiest glitches in the game, and I'm going to show you the easiest way of doing it so you can get a 3 for 3 as soon as possible. You'll notice I am using Baby Mario, but if you want to drift through the off-road, you can use other characters as well that can help with the recovery from the glitch. As for the glitch itself, you'll notice I'm stopping around the shadow portion on the ground right there. You'll notice I turn around right here, and I use my mushroom. I'm trying to hit the upward sloping section of the mushroom. That gives you plenty of airtime, and you really don't want to be anywhere near the finish line, or else your lap may not count. This glitch is kind of notorious for being finicky with the lap count. So as long as you're getting quite a bit of airtime and you're landing on the other side, that should be enough to get your lap to count. But yeah, I would strongly recommend looking at my input viewer to get a better sense of sort of how to manage the mountain. It's a little bit difficult at first, but with enough practice, I'm sure you can get a 3 for 3. So yeah. Okay, so we're moving on to Toad's Factory, and this is a very important category because a Toad's Factory time is a really good indicator of how good you are in the game. And you're going to notice I get a 154, and I'm going to ask that you not be intimidated by this kind of time. Even if you have a time closer to like 2 minutes or so, I think anyone can drive a 154 if they just really focus on using safe strats. And you're going to notice I am not going for any extra mini turbos. I'm not doing a double mini turbo on that turnaround, not on the green conveyor, and I'm doing 111, and I'm doing the shroom cut here, as you can see. And really that's all you need. You don't even need the low. And you're going to notice I get a 38.3 lap 1, and that is a very good lap 1. It's actually very important that you get a 38.4, and that'll allow you to beat the stomper on lap 2. And you really don't need anything special to get a time like a 154. Just really having a good foundation for soft drifting, being comfortable delay drifting as well. Just really focus on getting consistent strats, and you can get a time like this. So as far as the shroom goes itself, you're going to notice I'm trying to go parallel as I hit the boost panel, and I'm already drifting, and you can either nosedive or tail dive that. It really depends on what your exact alignment is. But I would strongly suggest, looking at other people's runs who do the shroom cut and sort of looking at how they approach with different angles in mind. So another thing to consider is that when you reach the end of that conveyor belt towards the beginning of the lap, you do want to try and hop off of it. And if you find that you're not getting the hop out, you're probably getting a small pocket of airtime, and a good way of dealing with that is just by wheelie nudging just a little bit before you do your hop, and that should get rid of the bounces right there. And a very similar thing when you're entering the red room, you do want to release that final mini turbo as you exit the conveyor belt. So those are just some smaller things to touch on, but yeah, that's how you get a 154. Okay, so moving on to Mario Circuit. I did not include a glitch category for this track because I felt like the glitch was a little bit too hard to justify putting in this video, but there's no reason you can't get a pretty solid no glitch time with some basic strats. But this is pretty similar to Luigi Circuit in that there really aren't many strats on this track. There is the ramp, but there's really no reason to go for that at a beginner level. And I would suggest using 111 basically until you want to add the ramp in and you want to go for a 121. But anytime slower than that, there's really no reason to. You'll notice at this last turn I am aiming to get towards like the middle of the track as like the road begins to slope downward. That's usually a good place to indicate you have a good alignment. And just avoiding wheelie nudging if you can, that's going to be really useful. Getting a good mushroom. My best advice for the mushroom, you do want to enter it pretty early. As you'll notice, I am entering it pretty early. Just as important as getting a good mushroom itself is making sure you are out of the cut itself as your shroom ends. If you are in the cut while your shroom ends, you are losing a ton of time. And last thing I want to touch on is just that Spear is very difficult to drive. So if you're having a hard time like committing to some of these turns and getting good alignments, that's totally normal. I definitely struggled when I was learning Spear. It's a very bouncy vehicle. Sometimes it's just hard to get wheelies out, but that will also come with practice as you just learn the terrain of the track. So yeah, that's Mario Circuit. Let's go on to Coconut Mall. Alright, so moving on to Coconut Mall. This is probably the most technical track that we've covered so far in this video, and there are a lot of really easy ways to go about much of this track. And the first thing you'll notice is I did not do a wheelie up that initial escalator, and that's actually faster the vast majority of the time. I think the exception is if you get like a chain wheelie and then you stick. So basically, like at a beginner level, you can really just cancel your wheelie, and that's totally fine. You can either shake down on your remote, or you can just hop right there. But you'll notice not going for any of the infi tricks. The strats that I'm doing are pretty much like the 2008 strategies, and these strategies have been pushed down to like a 157, so you can go like really far with these strategies. Yeah, and you don't even have to do anything too hard. So yeah, entering the mushroom here, thing to note, you're gonna be nose diving instead of tail diving like what you would do with newer strategies, since you're going to the left side and you're just holding that drift as you go up the escalator. And I think back in 2008 they would also release a mini turbo going down the following escalator. Up to you whether you want to do that or not. I didn't find that necessary. I think maybe it saves a little bit of time, but you know, it adds a little bit of difficulty to it as well. And being consistent with the upward and downward sloped stairs and all that, it can be challenging. So whatever you're comfortable going with. So you'll notice I did ride the curb right there as I went up the escalator, and I would strongly recommend using that if you can. It is a lot faster than going to the left side and taking the other escalator. So yeah, definitely do that if you can. I understand it's very hard to get a very good alignment out of the last turn and then have like a perfect parallel alignment going up to the curb, or whatever you call it, but you know, it's a big time save, so I would recommend it if you can. But yeah, those are basic strategies. The car cycles, they're going to be very pace dependent, so I can't really cover all of that in this video. But yeah, that's Coconut Mall. Okay, so moving on to the glitch category. This has seen so many different strategies used, and they are all different in difficulty. So just like Mushroom Gorge, I'm going to show you the absolute easiest one so you can get a glitch time as soon as possible. As you can see, we're coming over here to ride on the rail, and there's a little white spot that I'm looking for on the rail, and I just align, use my shroom. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything else, and you make that entry. Now there are a lot of small details about, getting a lap count to work, and where do you have to hit the key checkpoints and all that. So I will link a tutorial down below so you can get a better understanding, of how to do the glitch. But once again, this one's very easy to do. I think anyone at home can do this. And depending on the kind of entry you get, it might be faster to shroom immediately after making the entry. The amount of speed you get exiting the entry, varies quite significantly. But if you don't know where to use the shroom, or if you can't tell if you get a good entry or not a bad idea to just use it there. So yeah, that's the glitch category. Okay, so moving on to DK Summit, I was sort of debating whether to include the double cut or not. I actually decided not to, but like many of the other strategies I'm showing, I'm going to include a tutorial for that down below, so you should see a double shortcut tutorial. Probably Bauer can tell, he has a good video on it. But yeah, I'm going to show you basically easy strats for this track. You can get 38-second laps, no problem, even with the single. And once you add in the double, using these strats, probably get to like 153, and not too much of a problem. So basically what you're doing the single right there, you can't take it too tight, otherwise when you hit the wall, it's going to send you to the left instead of to the right. That's a pretty common problem for new players. Basically you want to enter a little bit later than you might expect, and then swing in super tight. And when you hit the wall, you'll be angled pretty far to the right, and you're not going to have a problem there. And then you just start at left drift when you land. Wouldn't recommend going up on the zipper after the single cut. I think that tends to lose time, although I haven't really seen a good comparison. And as for the moguls, there are a lot of ways you can take it. There's a pretty consistent triple mogul strat that's actually pretty fast as well. Mitch has a great video where he shows that off. I'll also link that in the description. A lot of different ways you can approach the moguls. Another important aspect of the track that people neglect to talk about is the ending section after the cut. And basically, you want to ride the zipper. I wouldn't recommend doing a wheelie until you're closer to like a 149. That really doesn't save all that much time. Basically, I wouldn't hop either. I would just kind of tap right on your stick as you're kind of on the zipper, and that'll give you some pretty low air time, but you'll still get the boost once you land. and really focus on getting that last trick and make sure you get the wheelie on the last trick. If you're missing the trick, that's automatically like 0.3 lost, and if you're not getting the wheelie out either, then you're just not getting nearly as much distance. So the approach I have is pretty good. It's pretty consistent. Just make sure you're hopping pretty early and that you aren't, you're wrapping around the entire way basically. Alright, so moving on to Warios Gold Mine no glitch, there are a lot of strategies available on this track, and it should hopefully be clear that you do not need any of them to get a solid time on this track. You're going to see I'm not doing turn skip, I'm not doing either of the turn skips, I'm not doing detach, I'm not doing wall bounce, none of them are needed. This is just a really line dependent track, and you can get closer to like I would say a 153 without doing all that much. A few of these turns can be kind of difficult to manage, especially like with the slopes and all that. It kind of adjusts your drift, it kind of sends you wide in some cases, so really just getting comfortable with the terrain is going to be a big part of improving your time here. And again, always watching the input display. There's actually a lot you can learn by just watching an input display of a run. You'll notice like I am re-hopping here instead of doing the chain drift. It's pretty hard to do the chain drift. I have a 150 and I don't do the chain drift, so yeah, that's what I would recommend for that. And for that trick right there, I would recommend you do an up trick and try and take it really tight and delay the trick as much as you can, because if you can stick to the ramp right there, that'll save you honestly like up to 0.1 a lap, and it's just kind of free time save. I kind of fail here, but there are a few different approaches for how you can take that section right there, like sort of after the wall bounce section. If you want to do like one drift and then you just realign before you run out of your mini turbo, that's totally fine. I probably would avoid doing like the double mini turbo like I did, unless there's like a minecart in the way. But just make sure as you're approaching like I guess the intended shortcut that you have your wheelie and you're at top speed basically. If you are looking to improve your time beyond like a 153, the first thing to add would be the wall bounce, and I'll see if there's a tutorial available. If so, it'll be in the description. Next thing to add would be the turn skip. I would do that sort of around a low 153 or like a 152. And lastly, I would get a 151 before adding the detach. So those are all the strategies I'm going to discuss, and let's move on. Alright, so moving on to the glitch category, I'm doing a 1 for 3 in this run, and a 1 for 3 is honestly really easy. I think anyone can do it. You really just turn right around here, and then you shroom, you want to land towards the back of the pipe. You can see I just immediately fell out of bounds. You get the respawn right here, and I'm actually playing the respawn really safe. Like you do not need to go anywhere near the third sort of wooden pole there, but it's safe if you want to get a lap count. And as you can see, I'm just doing 2 laps of no glitch driving now, and I am going to include some of the no glitch driving in this video, just because like even though it's pretty similar to the no glitch, the one difference is you don't have a shroom. So here's one way you can do it if the bats are in the way. I would just do a re-hop like that and get a mini turbo out. And if the bats aren't in the way, you're going to see lap 3, you just kind of wheelie through it, and you can re-hop again if you need to. But honestly, this is one of the easier glitches in the game. I chose not to include like a 2 for 3 or 3 for 3. Then you have to do it without a respawn, and you have to bounce off the pipe. It adds a layer of complexity that I think isn't worth including in this kind of video. But Guy has a great tutorial on how to do it. He has a tutorial on the easiest way of getting the no respawn glitch, and I will include a link to that in the description. I actually used those strats and I got a 38 with it. So you can push those kinds of strategies all the way to a 38, or even more. I think Arvo had a 34 with it before he improved. So yeah, those are basic Warios Gold Mine glitch strategies. With that in mind, this is great for cutting total time, because you're just cutting out the entire lap, and it's super easy to do. So yeah, that's a 136, and let's move on. Okay, so we're moving on to Daisy Circuit now, and this is another track that has a variety of different strategies, and I'm going to show you basically the easiest ones to get you. You can get close to like a 130. I'd say a 132 is pretty reasonable with this, or even a 131. You're going to notice I'm not doing the curb hop. It saves a little bit of time. You are kind of risking hitting the cones, which may slow you down a bit if you choose to go around it. I don't find the curb hop to be that difficult, but it is a source of possible, it's pretty QM dependent, sort of QM dependent, I don't really know, but it's up to you whether you want to include that or not. You can see we hit a 30.5, And okay, so the next part I want to talk about is the shortcut. You can see I do wheelie into it. Some people choose not to wheelie into it. I find if you do the wheelie, it's much more common that you'll hit most of the boost panels, and that just adds a layer of consistency. And then in the figure 8 section, you'll notice that I'm not doing, I think a lot of people have this other strategy where they just re-wheelie to the right and then they start a soft drift to the left. We're going to come up on that section in a moment. I find it's actually faster if you just kind of quickly hop to the right and then drift to the left right away. So we're entering that section now. Let's take a look. So you can see, start my wheelie and then drift right, immediately drift left. I find that's a little bit easier. You can also choose whether or not you want to go inside the cones or not. I do it on, I think, one of the laps. I don't think I did it on the other laps. This is kind of a fail. As for the U-turn, you ideally want to hit the yellow and red cones. It's really line dependent. It takes some practice. But yeah, that's Daisy Circuit. Alright, so we're moving on to Koopa Cape. This is one of the most technical tracks in the game, and it's another track where people tend to use strategies that really aren't worth going for. I think the biggest example would be the Mander strat. I'm not using the Mander. Another example would be the Shroomless cut. I'm not using Shroomless at all. I would recommend hopping on this ramp. I'm not sure why I didn't. I think I do that on laps 2 and 3. But yeah, so you can literally just go around this. There's really no harm in just skipping it until you're closer to, like, I would say a 223, 222, and then, you know, you can start adding in the Shroomless. I think the Shroomless is something that you could add like one lap at a time even, or just do it whenever you're just like down on your PR. It's a big source of randomness even for top players, and really not worth going for on a track this complex. But you'll see I did a really easy strat. This is, as you can see, instead of doing the Mander, I just drifted off of the last ramp, and it's actually a lot faster than people think. From what I've heard, it's like 150 milliseconds slower than Mander, so you're still losing time obviously, but for a strat that's 100% consistent, I mean, I think it's totally worth it. And I'm going for like a 219 on this track soon, and I don't plan on using Mander until I get to a 219, and then I'll probably add it in. So like even at a 219 level, like, you don't even need it. In fact, you can get a 218 without it. So highly discourage Mander. There are a lot of strats on this track. If you need to add things in, I would only do it if you're down on your time and you need it to PR. But as you can see, this ramp, it's pretty consistent. Bounces kind of happen sometimes. I think that's just something that comes with practice. This run isn't very good, but it's still like 224, 225 pace right now. I mean, that was a mid 48 lap. So it's really about taking these technical tracks and just finding the best option for your skill level. And if you're using the wrong strats, you're gonna have a really hard time improving. But yeah, so you can really push these basic strats down to like a 221 or so. There's also like this wraparound right here that is used kind of at world record level. I find it to not be that hard, but still it's definitely one of those strategies that you really need to wait until you add. But yeah, so that's Koopa Cape. A lot of basic strats here, and you can see we finished at a 224. So yeah, let's move on. Alright, so we're moving on to Maple Treeway, no glitch. We are not doing the glitch category in this video. Again, I felt like it was too hard to justify putting in at a beginner level. But how fitting is it that two of the most technical tracks are sort of back-to-back in the game? We had Koopa Cape and now this. But this is another example where like you can really push down really safe strategies to, I would say, like a 221 level pretty realistically. So one thing that really bugged me when I was going for like a 221 was holding out that mini turbo as we enter the top of the tree section. It felt like I was just wasting time by just holding it out for so long, but it actually is really important that you do that, especially if you're not, going for say a 217. Basically, you can get a ton of bounces there. If you guys have experience with this track, you know that firsthand. And holding out that MT, it's not that slow, I promise you. And for how consistent it is, I would say it's definitely worth it. The shroom itself is another important place for time save. Enmead has a great video going over this track, helping people of all skill levels. So that would be like, in fact, I would recommend that video over my own if you want to learn about Maple Treeway. So I will include a link to that in the description. He touches on the mushroom in great detail. and he'll help you out a ton. So the next thing I want to touch on is the Xenal strat, which is what I'm doing right now in the video, and basically you're taking advantage of drift storage, and this is something I learned quite recently. Basically what you do is you hold B as you go over the edge. You get a pocket of airtime, you just hold B, and then you just hold that. You keep going until you go up the ramp and then back down, and as you're going down you're holding a soft drift to the left, and that allows you to get an MT out. It's super fast. Actually, it's about as fast as a half chain, but I would definitely recommend it. So jack strat, really not worth going for. That's the wraparound strategy that world record does on that previous turn we just saw. And it's you can just do an MT and then you can add another one in as you make it around the turn. That's perfectly fine. And the U-turn itself, I'm showing you a very consistent and safe way of doing it. You'll notice I went off of the tree branch section, and I went on the far right side of the tree branch as I exited, and then I went towards the U-turn, and I held just a hard right drift, and that'll get you both boost panels, and you get the U-turn really quickly. Really great way of dealing with that turn. And yeah, let's move on. So we're moving on to Grumble Volcano No Glitch, and this is one of the tracks where a lot of time save doesn't come from doing hard strats. Time save is going to come, at least from a beginner level, from just not messing things up and taking tight lines all around. A lot of small stuff that really matters on this track, and I'm going to try and touch on everything. So you're going to notice I'm not doing a wheelie between these mini turbos, I'm just doing 2 MTs. If you can do a chain drift right there, that helps a little bit, gets the MT out a little bit more easily. You're going to notice I am doing a mini turbo here. In 2008, they would not do a mini turbo, and it all around just loses a lot of time. So make sure you're doing that mini turbo, make sure you're holding down left as you go off of the drifting island. But most of this driving, like you can see, you don't really need any of the fancy low tricks to get a good time here. We just had a pretty decent lap without anything crazy. This section can be very challenging, especially at a beginner level. I definitely struggled to get like a smooth alignment going all the way down to the following turn as you enter the cave. You don't need it, but if you can get like a low trick on that orange ramp, it really does help. And if you do choose to do that low trick, make sure you're holding back and you're landing on your back tire, and that'll give you some more wiggle room to just get the alignment. But overall, it's a really tough section. It does save a ton of time to get that consistent alignment, so if that's not working for you, sorry, but there's not much you can really do. Just make sure you don't do any more than 1 rehop. Ideally, you can get something like this. This alignment probably would have worked, but you can see I just rehopped. That's a totally fine way of doing it. It doesn't lose all that much time. Just do your best. It will take some practice, of course. And also just keep in mind which direction these islands are moving, because it will kind of influence the line you take and that fireball at the end of lap 3. The shroom is going to be kind of important. Make sure you're wheeling into the shroom. It actually makes it a little bit easier to get some more airtime. You get a little bit more distance on the shroom, and you get a good bounce. Make sure your bounce is happening before your shroom runs out. And yeah, that's Grumble Volcano. Alright, so moving on to the glitch side of things, the absolute easiest way to get onto the rock and to do the ultra shortcut is to turn around, fall off the track, and get on this way. So what you're going to do is you're going to go over to the ramp and you're going to stand still mini turbo, and you just tail dive, you hop on the edge, and you should make it up every single time. Just be aware you do have to cross over to the finish line, where it extends over towards the rock, and that'll just make sure you get the lap count. And then the last thing, you have to make sure you get the key checkpoint, and to do that you just swing around wide right here. You're going to see I swing around pretty close to the edge of the rock. You do have to go pretty far out in order to hit that key checkpoint, so just make sure you're doing that. And most of the time just make sure you're tapping A, and you'll just stay in control of the vehicle, and that's everything. Alright, so Dry Ruins, another very technical track, and another track where you don't need to do all that much to get a decent time. Now I am going to ask you to do probably the hardest strat I'm going to show you in this video, and that's going to be the wall glitch. But I'm going to show you that you actually don't have to pull it off perfectly. In fact, you can totally undershoot it and still have no problem. So you're going to see I drift into it, I get the wheelie trick, and if you undershoot it, it's totally fine. It's very easily recoverable. And if you make it perfectly, then that's even better. But if you overshoot it, then you're probably not going to make the glitch at all. There are a few cases where you can overshoot it and it'll still work, but those are pretty rare. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way of doing it. You just kind of soft drift into the wall to get the wheelie out. Try and stay low. And yeah, I do it pretty similarly on this lap as well. Shroom strat's going to be 1-1-1. You're going to see I'm going to use my mushroom at the very end of the lap, and I'll have a few tips for you when we get there as well. You're going to see I did the full wall glitch here. Totally fine as well. So in case you do overshoot it, then you'll probably end up getting it properly. But yeah, no trick here. You're going to land neutral, and you're going to intentionally get a bad landing, and then you're going to wheelie into this cut and try and shroom as you land. Don't shroom into the cut. That's going to give you a ton of excessive airtime that you don't want. You can also do a trick on that, what's it called? I don't know, the thing on the ground. But yeah, whatever you find easiest. And I would try and learn these low tricks. They're not that bad. It's just a hop trick. It is kind of precise if you're like a new player, but it really is not that bad. I kind of messed this up, but that's what I kind of mean. Like if you don't do it properly, it's still like you can still recover from it. But I just felt like there wasn't any good alternative that was really easy, but didn't lose enough. Like it didn't lose a lot of time, if that makes sense. So I would just suggest going for the wall glitch. But yeah, that's DDR. Alright, so moving on to Moonview Highway, and I'm going to be honest, I really had a hard time getting a run for this track, and there's a very good reason. It's just because this track is so pace dependent. There are a lot of really tiny pace locks that are kind of difficult to get by. So I believe I went to the left of the blue car at the beginning of lap 3, which is around 145 pace, low 145 I believe. I kind of failed, so it's kind of like a higher 145. But yeah, this is just a really pace dependent track, and I can't, just based on the nature of the format of this video, I can't touch on all of the different pace locks. But what I can do is give you some general driving tips that will allow you to save some time. Now, the first thing I would touch on is this side trick right here. If you can, just delay that trick as much as possible. It will reduce your airtime. That is a good source of time save. I would recommend trying to shroom at one point or another. Just shroom during that long straightaway to cancel the chain out. If you're not good at chains, that's going to save quite a bit of time. But yeah, it's okay. I would look at other runs that other people have done that are around your skill level, and just see what shroom strats they use. That would be my best advice. And look at how they deal with different pace locks as well. So you're going to notice at this pace, I just happen to be slow enough to get around the blue car. And this turn can be a little jank as well. You can do this double MT, or you can just do like what the 143 strat is and just immediately go into a wheelie and not do the second MT. Another thing, I guess, yeah, don't do an MT around that turn. That's really a low 144 strategy. Okay, yeah, I kind of missed the boost panel there, so that was kind of a fail. But, you know, if you imagine me hitting that boost panel, it would have been like almost probably close to like a low 145 or so. But, yeah, that's Moonview Highway. Alright, so we're moving on to BCUE no glitch. I did not include the glitch category in this video. I feel like that is also a little bit too difficult to justify putting in a video like this, but there are plenty of tutorials out there for that if you would like a glitch time. But yeah, so basically this is a really tough track to finish a run on. So if you're having a hard time, trust me, I am too. We've all been there. But with basic driving, you can realistically get a 226. 226 or so, that's pretty reasonable. But yeah, you're gonna notice this is one of the strats I'm using is I'm riding the right side of that half pipe right there, and when I get the trick, I am landing on the left side, and that is basically reducing my airtime rather than starting at the base of the half pipe and then getting a bunch of airtime. This is just an easier way of doing it. A lot of different mogul strats, sorry, not moguls, the geyser strats. I kind of fail it here, but basically you really want to focus on is staying low to the ground, and you can do that a few different ways. One of them is by landing on the back of a geyser and getting a trick on the back of it, but more realistically the best way is to just trick on the very side of it, and that should give you low airtime. If you're landing, or if you're tricking off of the front of a geyser, you're going to get shot up in the air. It's basically like riding off a ramp at that point. So try to avoid that whenever possible. Like Moonview Highway, I would also recommend finding a time that's around your level, or honestly just asking someone else who has a time similar to you, and getting some advice that way. But watching other runs is really a great way of going about this. Like you're going to notice right here, you know, those guys were a little better. It was a little too much airtime, but in general it was pretty good. And that was a 47 laps, so that's 223 driving with really nothing special. And if you can, I would try hopping when you go through the wavy road section. That should give you less airtime, and it gives you a nice trick. And there's a good time to do it. There's a good time not to do it. In general, when you're riding down the slope of the wavy road, that is a good time to hop. You should get pretty low airtime that way. So yeah, and you can take out this mini turbo if you want to. I know, like, you can often get some weird bounces going around like the stair section, so no harm in getting rid of that if that's causing you problems. But yeah, very tough track, but with some basic strats, I'm sure you can get at least a 226 or so. So yeah, let's move on. Alright, so we're moving on to Rainbow Road No Glitch, and as you can see, I'm using the Flame Runner. You certainly can use Kart, but at a beginner level, I wouldn't recommend it. Once you get a 232 or so, you can certainly switch to Kart. It really is up to personal preference. If you want like a really good Kart time long term, I would certainly recommend switching early. But some people push their bike time pretty far down. Like, I know Ivan almost has a 225 now, and he has the bike BKT. But you're going to notice, as for the shroom strategy I'm using, I'm not doing the moon jump on lap 1. I am going to be doing it on laps 2 and 3. The reason I didn't do it lap 1 is just because you can get pace locked out of hitting that flip trick ramp, and the flip trick saves more time than the moon jump does. So it's really important that you hit that on all 3 laps if possible. But if you can drive quickly, especially towards the beginning of the track, you certainly can do the moon jump still. You can beat the pace lock at the beginning of the lap, but you just have to make sure you're taking those first few turns pretty fast, and you can make it. But if you're not able to do that, no harm in using the shroom where I did, and doing it right after the cannon. I did get bounces exiting the cannon, so I didn't do it all that well, but yeah, you just get a mini turbo and all is well. So another important section of the track that people tend to struggle with is going to be the anti-gravity section. And I certainly struggled with this quite a bit when I was learning Flame Runner. I actually still do, but I switched to Kart, and it's not really a problem on Kart. But best way to deal with this section, as you can see, I'm going to get this mini turbo out, and I'm going to try and align myself pretty far to the right. And you start to drift to the left. You want to drift hard to the left. You really have to commit to it, but try and drift late if you can. If you drift too early, a lot of the time you're just going to end up hitting the pole on the side, and your run will be dead. So try and drift later if possible. Best advice for the moon jump, make sure you are tail diving. I'm not really sure why it's faster to tail dive, but this is what everyone does. It seems like everywhere else you tend to nosedive just to minimize airtime. But something about the physics of just this track in particular makes tail diving better. And for the figure 8 section, no harm in getting a little bit of airtime. If you can, it's better to hit like the back section of the ramp, kind of what like the bike BKT does. You get like no airtime, can save quite a bit of time as well. And if you want to do the shroomless, you definitely can. You definitely need to get that wheelie out in time. I find it's pretty hard to get it consistently. It's another one of those things that's easier on Kart if you do know Kart. But yeah, so those are basic strategies for this track. You can really push them down quite far. But yeah, that's a 234, and I'm sure you guys can do something similar. Alright, and we're moving on to Peach Beach No Glitch. And first thing I want to talk about is the shroom, because it all comes down to your initial alignment. You can see I started by wheelie nudging to the right, and there's a perfect spot where you want to start your right drift. You just want to 08 drift it. That means hopping and holding right on the stick at the same time. And you want to start that drift right where the shadow ends, and I'll have a picture on screen right now. Basically, you'll just get a perfect alignment into the cut. You just want to shroom as late as you can without losing speed initially, and you'll exit the cut and you'll have a good alignment going out of it. But other than that, there's really not much about this track that's all that complicated. Best advice for this section, you can go to the right of that duck, the green one. If you are fast enough, you can go to the left of it, but it's really up to you. You don't need to get like instant alignments out of a lot of these turns. You can totally just do a follow-through wheelie. It doesn't lose much time at all, and it can give you much more consistency with the turns. Chain wheelies are going to be a decent source of time save, but that's going to be more towards when you get to a higher level on the track. And when you go into this water right here, you really want to try and space your shrooms out as much as you can. but make sure you are not losing speed. If you lose speed and you space those shrooms out too much, you know, all your time saves are just going to be gone. So just make sure your timing goes well, you get out of the water at top speed, and all is well. Alright, so we're moving on to Yoshi Falls, everyone's favorite track in the game for time trials, and my best advice for this track would be to change how you do this section right here. Try out this mini turbo strategy, because I promise you it's not that slow, and it's way more consistent than the stick will ever be. Thank God that we have the mini turbo option. You can do a mini turbo here going into the lap transition, but I wouldn't recommend it. Honestly, just doing this re-wheelie is easier. But yeah, this chime is not driven very well, but you know, it's part of life. Sometimes you'll just bounce over boost panels. It really just takes some practice, you know, getting familiar with the terrain. But don't tell yourself like, I'm not hitting good laps because Yoshi Falls is Yoshi Falls. Like, try and learn stuff about this track, because you can still get better. I used to hit like 20-second laps on average, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know, like, what else am I supposed to do, because Yoshi Falls is Yoshi Falls, and now my average lap is like, I don't know, a mid.8. You can still learn stuff about this track. There's a reason people hit like 19.6 laps on average, and you can do the same. Just keep an open mind. Alright, Ghost Valley 2. This is a short track, so I gotta get everything in quickly. Very tough track to do well. Hardest part is without a doubt going to be the shortcut. Basically, you want to try and aim towards the middle of the ramp and then start a drift early if possible, and make sure you're leaning back while you're in the air. That'll just align your bike a little bit better, give you a more rightward angle so you can have a better recovery from the shroom. The shroom itself isn't the hard part, it's just the recovery, getting that nice and fast. Try and do chain drifts whenever possible. A lot of these turns are just about getting the MTs out quickly, having a mastery of soft drifting, and once you get good, you can also super soft drift, and that will come in handy, especially on some of the later turns in this track. But yeah, chain drift's going to be really helpful early on in the track right here, getting the shroom, getting a good recovery, finishing tight, and try and drift on that little piece of wood right there. I'll have a picture on screen. That saves a little bit of time, and it's super useful. So yeah, that is Ghost Valley 2. Alright, so we're moving on to Mario Raceway, and this is a very line-dependent track, and of course we're going to be going over all the safe strats, and with these you can probably get close to like a 143, I would say. I think that's pretty reasonable, but there are other things you can add, of course. These are just the base strategies to get you to that level. So taking the shroom, try and be parallel if you can in the turn prior to the shroom, and then swing in tight, and try and get close to the piranha. Don't hit it, of course, but the tighter the better. And if you can do a chain drift around the following turn, that will save you some time. You get a good alignment going into the next straightaway, and as you can see, with pretty basic driving, we hit a mid-34 lap, so pretty good pace so far. And for this turn right here, don't be afraid to swing out wide. That should make it a little bit easier to get a good line entering the turn prior to the turn before the shroom. But yeah, try and be towards the middle of the road in this section. That should allow you to swing in tight. No need for the double MT if you're struggling with that. I think it's still faster even if you don't sort of get the chain drift into the double MT. But yeah, all the strats pretty easy here. There is the double pipe trick. Wouldn't really recommend it. If you want to go for double pipe, I added the double pipe around a low 143, and after adding it 3 for 3, I got to like a mid 142, so you could probably do something similar. Definitely don't worry about adding it too early, but it's also one of those strats where, like, if you're down on your PB, no harm in going for it if you need it to improve your time. But yeah, this is not kind of the focus of the video, since I think the strat is a little bit too hard to justify doing regularly. And as for that pipe trick, try and do a left trick. Those tend to be pretty fast, and they should give you less airtime as well. But yeah, that's Mario Raceway. Alright, so we're moving on to Sherbet Land. This is another very line-dependent track, but there is a lot of things I can touch on that can make your life a lot easier. First thing, we already have a problem on the first turn. The penguin is a problem. Just try and be really aggressive with it. Swing in super tight and go left, right, left on the stick as you go over the gap, and that should hopefully not give you any bounces if you do it properly. So another thing to think about is after you exit the shroom, you're not going to have a great alignment, especially as you approach the penguins and you enter the cave. So what you want to do is actually hold hard left even though you're in your wheelie. and that's really strange advice because there's no other case where you would hold hard left on your stick during a wheelie, but it's Magic Cruiser and it's actually not that slow. In fact, it's what the world record does. So do that if you can. As for the shroom itself, I actually want to take a look at it when we get up here. Yeah, so you're going to notice I'm going to hop right, and then I'm going to drift left, and then hop. And you don't have to spin drift. Spin drifts are what the world record does. I think it makes it easier to do the spin drifts, but if you don't have experience with spin drifts, no need for it. Just don't be afraid to play it safe. Same thing with this cave driving. Like, you're going to notice I'm not being too aggressive with the cave driving, especially this turn right here. It's a blind turn. It's very hard to do. So don't be afraid to take the turns kind of wide when you, release your MT. This is kind of a fail. This turn, or this alignment's also really important. There's actually a section on the ice behind it that I aim for, kind of a darker patch on the ice, and I'll show a picture of that. That's a great spot to aim for. I know it's a very open section before the last turn, so it's not really obvious where you need to be aligned for. But yeah, that should simplify things quite a bit. And just with these basic strats, you can get down to a 206. There are a lot of chain wheelies on the track, but it's Magic Cruiser. You're going to notice I accelerate super quickly, get up to top speed very, very fast. Then again, there's so many of the chains that it still does matter. So try your best to get good at chains. Definitely try and time them. I wouldn't recommend spamming them. Even if at a beginner level, it's easier to just spam them. It's worth learning in the long run if you want to get good at this game. But yeah, that's Sherbet Land, and now it's time for Shy Guy Beach. Alright, so moving on to Shy Guy Beach, we are using Magic Cruiser, which is undoubtedly the easiest vehicle for this track. If you can get to, say, a low 123 on Magic Cruiser, that's when I would recommend switching to Spear, or even a mid 123. I think I switched to Spear on a mid 123. But you can definitely get a 124 without any problem on Magic Cruiser. Just some basic strats can get you there. And I think, yeah, this run is a 123, so you really don't need anything special to get to a 123. You don't even need the pink ramp. The pink ramp is a little faster. You do need to get the low for it to be faster. But if you're having trouble with that, no need for it. So whenever you release an MT that is kind of exiting the water, like this is a great example, I'm exiting an MT and I go from water to land, try and release it so that the mini turbo is partially overlapping while you're on land, and that'll allow you to exit at full speed. Whereas if I release this MT, like here's another example, if I released that MT very early and I got into a wheelie immediately, I would still slow down a little bit while I was in the water, and I would have to accelerate when I got back to the land. So if you're going to, there are a lot of like 3 cases where this is happening on this track, like right there. So try and release the MT so that it overlaps with the land, you get the wheelie out, you don't have to accelerate. It's not that, like, it doesn't lose all that much time, but it's still, it's a pretty short track, so you kind of have to look for those small things. But yeah, those are very easy strats, and I'm sure you can do something similar. Alright, so we're moving on to DS Delfino Square, and at a 205 level, this track becomes kind of chain wheelie hell, but at a beginner level, it's really not that bad. Like, you don't need any of the chain wheelies. You can get to a 205 or so without that many. In fact, I think you can get all drops and get to 205. You just really need to work on the driving to get to that point. First thing I want to touch on is this staircase right here. You'll either get a stick or air. I got air. I just happen to get air. And basically, you want to get a slip drift for the following turn. And to do that, you'll basically always get a pocket of airtime right at the bottom of the staircase. And you'll notice I held drift as I got that pocket of airtime, and I really quickly went left, right, left on the stick. And basically, that'll initiate the slip drift, send you a little bit wider so you have room to charge the MT, and then you finish it with a soft drift and then instant wheelie into the next turn. Now the last turn of the track can be challenging as well. You kind of need a very precise hop timing, to land flush with the track. But charging the MT itself isn't that hard. It's really about getting the right alignment, going up the hill. It is pretty challenging to do, so no worries if you have to re-hop. That's kind of part of the track. This turn right here, also kind of a precise hop timing. You really also want to land flush with the track. Allows you to get a very nice alignment into the following turn. The shroom, you can't really mess up the shroom. It's really not that bad. As long as you're exiting pretty tight, that's all you could really ask for. Just make sure you're, just time the shroom properly. There's really not that much to it, honestly. But yeah, it's not a very technical track. please do not go for the dock. Get a 204.3 or so, and then go for the dock. But yeah, I mean, the shroomless dock is really hard. There's like no reason to ever go for it, basically. But yeah, really not that much to this track. I would definitely keep practicing the chain wheelies. That's going to be important regardless of what time you have. I definitely yield a lot of time save. And lap 3, this is a little bit different. I would approach it this way if you can. If you can, please get the chain drift. That'll just save you a lot of time. Just makes your life a whole lot easier. I missed the last empty, ignore that. But that probably would have been a low 206. So yeah, let's move on. Alright, so we're moving on to Mario Kart Wii's most technical track, GCN Waluigi Stadium, and this entire video I've been emphasizing the importance of consistent strats, and no track is a better example of the importance of consistent strats, and I'm going to be showing you easy variants to everything. And good example is the wall bounce. You can see I'm doing an up trick wall bounce as opposed to what world record does, which is a down trick wall bounce, and it seems similar, but they're actually very different in difficulty. Up trick is way easier, and if you're on nunchuck, you're probably already doing up tricks everywhere, so no reason to change things. Just drift to the left and it should work most of the time. Just try and stay close to the ground if possible. No need to do an ultra low trick on this last ramp. It's actually very hard to get a good low trick and a good landing, so feel free to tail dive that as well. You're gonna notice I'm doing kind of the world record strategy on that turn. I don't even know what you call that turn. Just you know, you hold right, you tail dive, and that'll rotate your bike while you're in the air. And feel free to take it wide. Just don't land, you know, where the world record is landing. That makes it a whole lot harder and a lot more precise. It is definitely faster, but in terms of consistency, it's going to be dropping off significantly. So yeah, a lot of different stuff you can go for on this track. There's also turn skip. Please don't go for turn skip. In fact, if you want to go for turn skip, you won't be benefiting from this video, because I would designate you to Falco's video, which will be in the description. If you have like a 154 or a 153, I would suggest watching his video, and he'll show you how to go from that to a 148. And it's a real struggle to get past like a 153. You know, even in my experience from time trialing this track, it is so hard to improve. Last thing I want to touch on is right here. You're going to notice that turn, sometimes it's hard to get the wheelie out, sometimes the wheelie just won't come out. Feel free to hold that drift as long as you need to. If you hold it out a little bit longer, sometimes that wheelie will come out and makes it a little bit easier to manage. But yeah, that's GCN Waluigi Stadium. Alright, so moving on to DS Desert Hills. This is another track that has a glitch category, but it is too hard to justify putting in a beginner video. But much of this is going to be a very line-dependent track in terms of, you know, time save at a beginner level, but the shortcut is also going to be really, really important. Just a basic understanding of most of the terrain, particularly the shortcut, can get you close to like a 136, even like a lower 136, but I'm going to try and show you the easiest way to do the shortcut. So basically you have quite a bit of wiggle room in terms of, you know, how you approach the shortcut. There's like a change in direction on the hill itself, and I try to aim a little bit to the right of that, or even at that sort of change in angle. And basically you get to the sand and you hop left and then use your shroom like right before you're about to slow down. If you slow down a little bit, it's probably not going to work just because you'll have to re-accelerate as you do it. But as you make it over the hill, you start to lean back, and you basically want to land on your back tire, and if you do it properly, you have the shroom boost as you hit that second mound, and you'll get just enough height to clear it. And if you do it properly, you'll ideally land right after the second mound, and there's sort of a downward sloping section of the track, and right as you land, you want to time that wheelie perfectly, and you're actually not going to have to accelerate from base speed if you do it correctly. Now, if you get a little too much distance, like on this shortcut I'm about to do, I do get too much distance, and take a look at the speedometer, because I'm not going to be at top speed as I get the wheelie out, and that is some time loss. So let's take a look right here, and as I land, I get the wheelie, but I'm accelerating from 80 kilometers per hour, so that's quite a bit of time loss. But with that being said, that's Desert Hills. Okay, so we're moving on to BC3, no shortcut. And this is kind of like Delfino Square in the sense that the chains are super important, especially as you get to a higher level. But they're not all that bad when you're, I would say, around 220-ish, or a little bit slower than that. Mainly the lows are the thing to focus on. and you're going to notice I intentionally don't go for all the lows. I kind of failed, but ignore that. But I intentionally don't go for the 4th low, but I'm going for every other low. Now the reason you skip the 4th one is just because the islands are actually farther apart, and it literally just makes it harder to get. So definitely don't go for that one. I would say like once you get to a 219 or so, that's when you can start going for the 4th one. But I really we're looking for consistency here. Just go for the first 3 and then the very last one. And even if you get the low, there are still variations to the kinds of lows you can get. There's both good lows and bad lows. The world record still gets kind of a mix of them, with a bias towards the better ones, obviously, since it's world record. But really, there's not much of a difference, especially at a lower level. The chains are going to make more of a difference than, you know, the amount of good lows and bad lows you get. But it's just really the focus is just on getting as many of them as possible. And if you're comfortable doing a side trick, definitely go for a side trick. It's a lot harder on Nunchuck. Now, there hasn't been much of like a difference, especially in the previous tracks, about you know, certain remotes being better than others, but this is a case where your remote type does really matter. It's definitely easier to get the side tricks out on, you know, if you have a D-pad available, so that would be Classic Pro, or GCN. But on Nunchuck or on wheel, I don't even want to imagine. But on Nunchuck, I usually just turn the remote sideways, and then I have to quickly rotate it back to normal and then do the wheelie that way. It's very challenging. So yes, sorry to all my Nunchuck users, but not much you can really do there. You don't have to go for a second mini turbo on that turn right there. It's really up to you whether you want to do that or not. Obviously, chain wheelies are going to be important. The very last turn of this track can be pretty challenging. There is a visual cue. It's just when you see the lava, you release the MT, and then you instant wheelie. You don't have to instant wheelie. You can just do a follow-through chain like I'm doing, and you know, if you need to, you can adjust in your wheelie just as you see fit. But yeah, that's BC3 and no shortcut. Alright, and moving on to the shortcut category. This is actually kind of convenient because there were a few other things on the no shortcut driving that I did want to touch on but simply didn't have the time for, so now we can talk about it. But obviously the only difference between this and the no glitch category is just going to be the shortcut, and I'm going to show you the absolute easiest way of doing it. Can be 100% consistent, but as you start to do it faster and faster, it becomes more challenging, of course. So as you can see, we're just going to stop right after this 4th low. We're going to turn. There's a specific alignment you're looking for. Some of them, you know, depending where you stop, they can give you more or less airtime. Really, all you're looking for is, you know, getting it at least somewhat quickly. The airtime itself isn't a huge deal, but try and get a mini turbo out. Another thing to really focus on is making sure you're comfortable soft drifting and delay drifting, because this track is full of 90-degree turns, and it is really important that you're able to just get an instant wheelie out of a lot of the turns. And a lot of these turns also have like visual cues or the rhythm cues that I look for when I'm making a lot of these turns. I'll put some of them on screen just so you kind of have an idea of, you know, what to do. Still go for these lows if you can. Just be cautious that you don't do it on the low you're supposed to, you know, turn around and do shortcut for. But yeah, it's kind of nice because this shortcut isn't too difficult at all. Anyone can really pick this up. One of the easiest shortcut categories in the game. But yeah, chain wheelies still matter. Remember, like 95% of this category is still no glitch driving. So, you know, the shortcut itself, it cuts out 2 turns. So the no glitch driving is still incredibly important. This isn't like, I don't know, Sherbet Land glitch where you can just cut out the entire lap and you don't have to worry about no glitch driving. But yeah, so like I said, delay drifting is going to be really important. That just allows you to, it maintains your bike's direction as you start the drift, so it gives you more room to charge the mini turbo. And then soft drifting, it allows you to turn more softly while still charging your mini turbo at the maximum speed possible. So those are 2 really important aspects of this track. So yeah, no shrooms to do that normal cut. As you do this last turn, it's better to have an alignment farther to the right. That just gives you more room as you make the final turn. It's a kind of a hard turn altogether. It's kind of blind, but you know, you get better at it. So yeah, that's BC3. Alright, here we are on DK Jungle Parkway. No glitch. This is another category where I did not include the glitch, but we can still focus on the no glitch driving, and we can get you a 215 without a doubt. That is the Carter guarantee. But yeah, we're gonna once again focus on all the safe strats. First thing, look at this cannon. Okay, I actually didn't do this right, but as you exit the cannon, it's better to get a hop out. It's a really small thing, but just try and time a hop, and then you just take the turn a little bit tighter. It's free time save, just don't worry about it, just go ahead and do that. And you're gonna notice like you can take a lot of these turns pretty safe. You know, riding the coping on some of these turns, it is something you can do. Some of the turns are easier than others. I believe on lap 3 I pick up the pace a little bit, and I'm going to show you what 214 driving looks like, and we're going to see how that differs compared to, what is this, 45.8, so it's going to be like a 216 pace or so. So yeah, so we're going to look at this first turn here. If you can ride that turn, it'll send you a little bit tighter like what the world record does. That is the easiest. It's not the easiest, but it is the fastest way of approaching that first turn. It's pretty challenging, so no worries if you are struggling with it. And if you can, try and instant wheelie out of a lot of these turns. I kind of fail here, but you know, that's okay. So that turn right there, that's one you can ride, and that's pretty easy to do. The next one you can do is this turn as well. Just beware, exiting with an instant wheelie is kind of challenging, so just be careful for that. And then there's the Shroom, which since 2008 has been ruining players' lives, including my own, but that's okay because you can take it safe. It is quite a bit slower to take it safe, I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. But, you know, in terms of just getting a run, in terms of getting a 215, you don't need to take it super tight. If you really just focus on optimizing your lines throughout the track, that should give you enough wiggle room so that you can, you know, do a safe Shroom like that. And like I said, I'm picking up the driving here. You're going to see I'm riding more of the turns, including that one. You can get pretty close to the coping, pretty close to the grass. You can even touch some of the grass because it's not visually, you know, you can see the grass. It's not actually the off-road. It's just right next to the off-road. It overlaps a little bit. And then we're going to see the last room right here. Once again, playing it pretty safe. You know, obviously the more aggressive you take it, the more risky it is, but it's faster. So really up to you what you want to do. Alright, so moving on to RMC. This is quite a technical track, but there are safe ways of going about everything on this track, and I'm going to show you everything you need to know. So first of all, we have a double MT on that first turn. You don't need to do both of them, but it's definitely faster to get the second MT out. You can also add that wheelie in if you want to, but the main focus of this track, especially at a beginner level, is getting good shortcuts. And if you want to get good shortcuts, I recommend holding out that mini turbo like you saw me do and just get a wheelie into the cut, and sometimes you won't get the airtime that you need. It is kind of a QM strat, so don't worry about it if you're not getting it 100% of the time. It definitely takes a little bit of time to get a 3-for-3 run with good shortcuts, but it definitely gives you more airtime to get that hop out. And if you don't want to do a double MT here, if you can't do the chain drift, you're going to see I do a slightly different approach on lap 3. That'll help you out for sure. And two other places to focus on this track are going to be the chain wheelies and the double trick right at the end here. And by double trick, I mean don't do a double trick, do a single trick. World record does a double trick, but it's quite a bit harder. In fact, I have like a mid 131 and I only do it twice because it's very hard to do. Top players, it's a little bit more consistent, but you know, I don't expect people at home to just knock out like a 3-for-3 double trick run. So if you hop a little bit later, you'll be able to get over the mound and you'll get a single trick out, and it's not that slow. In fact, it's good enough for like a low 132 in fact. But also the chain wheelies, those are going to continue to be an important spot for time save. Just keep working on that. It'll get a little bit better as you improve, but yeah, that's RMC. Alright, so moving on to Mario Circuit 3, there are a few things I want to touch on, but largely the driving here is pretty simple, really about just taking the turns tight, and obviously the Shroom is going to be a big source of time save, really just having good soft drifts as well. This turn right here is one I want to talk about. So basically a lot of people will do 2 mini turbos back to back. That's what I used to do. It's actually not the best way of taking the turn. Obviously the optimal way is by doing the triple MT that world record does, but I don't expect you to do that. So basically, best alternative is going to be an MT, and then you go into a wheelie because the turn kind of straightens out for a little section. So do a wheelie there, try and hold that for as long as you can, and then start your next drift again. And you're going to see me right here. You want to do your last MT, and you want to drift through that that red and white section that alternates back and forth. That's going to be the best way of taking the turn. And now my advice for the Shroom. Your exit from the hairpin turn is going to determine how you take the Shroom, so try and be really consistent with how you exit that turn. I know it's kind of hard because it's kind of hard to know exactly where you're going to be going, but you really do want to commit to it. It's okay to, you know, alternate between like hard right and then soft right, but make sure you're not going neutral. You really want to focus on the exit of this cut, and as you're going to see, you want to exit super tight and just get that MT out right away and get back up to top speed. You don't want to spend any time slowing down from the off-road. But yeah, those are the big things to focus on, and that's MC3. Alright, and we're moving on to DS Peach Gardens, one of my favorite time trials in this game. Very simple track, it's very line dependent, but there's actually some tech to it, and I'm going to show you obviously all of the best ways of going about it. So Flame Runner, I'm obviously just going to recommend that. You know, it's the best understood vehicle, and the driving is just easiest on Flame Runner. There is Auto Spear. Please don't use Auto Spear unless you like want to get a like low 159 and then just stay there forever. That's pretty much the limit of Spear Auto, but there's quite a bit of tech to Flame Runner. First thing to touch on, if you can't do this chain drift right here, that's okay. You can just do, you know, the normal hop. Last turn, there are a few ways of going about it. You could do a super soft drift and then take the MT, but this is the easiest way. You just hold the MT down the stairs. It should be fully charged by the time you're at the bottom, and you'll be able to release it and get a good alignment. Shroom, I recommend doing your shroom before you start your drift. That will ensure that you're not at base speed at all, and as soon as that shroom ends, you're going to be fully charged with that MT and you can release it right away. Now this section right here, there is the Scorpy strat, which is what the world record does. I don't expect you to do that. You can just release that wheelie, kind of hop over the grass like I'm doing, or the flower bed, and it's not that hard. And it's not all that much slower. It's a little bit slower, but these are like 201 strats. You can get 201 with these, no problem. It's really just about cleaning up the driving. I kind of bounce against the fence right there, so ignore that. But yeah, no chain wheelies at all. This is just such a fun track. Well, I guess there is one chain wheelie. It's sort of at this flower bed over here. The chain chop will be kind of a problem. Once you add the Scorpy strat, then you can beat chain chop. I would say once you're at a low 201, add Scorpy, and you'll be able to beat the chain chop 100% of the time. You can take this turn kind of wide, enter it pretty wide. It's very hard to do consistently if you enter it very tight. And as you just saw, as I went to the round flower bed section, I did what's called a pseudo slip drift, and it's basically like a slip drift, but you get just a smaller hop, and it's much easier to charge the mini turbo that way. And yeah, that's a great approach to that turn, and I'm sure you can get a 201. Alright, so we're moving on to GCN DK Mountain. And guys, I know how painful this track can be at a beginner level, but I promise you a lot of this can be consistent, and I'm going to show you that it's not as bad as it seems. I promise you. So firstly, looking at that first turn, I know it can be hard to get that MT and the wheelie out. You saw me, I kind of drifted to the left and I drifted to the right. That's totally a fine way of approaching it. It's a little bit slower than what world record does. The world record just does a hop and hops to the left and then drifts to the right. But just make sure you get that wheelie out as you exit that first turn. That's going to be pretty important. So I guess I'll talk about the shortcut now. So you really want to focus on having that wide approach in the turn before the shortcut, and you don't have to do anything special. As you can see, you just kind of slow down, turn to the right, and then you get your hop. You can do like 2 hops. I think some people do 2 hops. Really no need for that. Optimally, you would do a spin drift to the right, but I don't expect you to do it all that perfectly. It's still very challenging to do, even at a top level. There is the MT cut. Please do not do the MT cut. I swear, if any of you are doing the MT cut, you better be going for world record. Now, this turn is also worth discussing. There's so many different approaches to this, man. Okay, if you get, as you saw, like in that case, my bike started rotating in the air. If that happens to you, you want to tail dive all the way, and you just want to hold that, and as you land, as you hit the ground, your wheelie is going to end, so just chain your wheelie again, and you're going to start going all the way to the right, and it should give you a good alignment if you do it properly. But in some cases that's not going to happen. I think lap 1 I had like a really jank section. I'm not really sure what happens in lap 3 here, so I guess we'll be reacting to it live, but in some cases you can just drift to the right, don't get the MT out, you just restart the wheelie. That's a totally fine way of doing it. It's a little slower. It's better to have the bike sort of rotate in the air, especially on the no glitch category. Yeah, so this is what I mean. So you just start the wheelie that way, and really understand how like nosediving and tail diving affects your bike. Like that's going to be really important, especially for this track. It's not just about driving to the left and to the right. You know, you really should learn how to take advantage of the nosedive and tail dive. And there you can shroom early on lap 3. It is faster to do that, but no need for it if you struggle with that. But yeah, that's DK Mountain. Alright, so we are on RBC now, the last track in the game, and there are a lot of things I want to touch on. No reason that any of you cannot get a 234, but I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm actually showing off quite a few different strategies in this run, different strategies on each lap actually, because I feel like there are different approaches that are worth showing off. Main things to focus on are going to be the shroom, and then the very last section of the track where you do the, what's it called? I don't want to call it a turn skip, but you know what I mean. So first thing to focus on, you want to start a soft drift right there. If you want to hold that mini turbo out, that's perfectly fine, and then just try and get a wheelie on that staircase. That is a slightly slower way, but also a very safe way of doing the turn. Now I want to touch on the shroom, but I'll do that next lap. First thing I want to focus on is this turn right here. You're going to notice I had a slight left to right angle, and while I was in the air, I held soft right, and what that does, it sets you up to go parallel with the rail right there, and if you just re-hop, you'll reset your wheelie, and then that'll take you to the end. Ideally, you would just do a spin drift on that last turn, and you should be able to make it around without much of a problem. And I'm going to show you a different approach on lap 2 and lap 3, but this is undoubtedly the fastest way. So as I mentioned, the spin drift is the fastest approach, but you can do what I'm doing in this run, which is a double hop. You can start with a spin drift, and then you just hop to the right once again as soon as you land from that first hop, and that should set you up pretty nicely. Now next thing I want to touch on is the shroom, of course. You're going to notice there was a building, and then there was the opposite corner of the grass, and the safe way of doing the shroom would be by entering sort of in the middle between them, and then if you can, try and hold a hard left drift throughout the entire shroom. But we're going to pause about the shroom once again, focus on this turn right here. You're going to notice I had a slight left to right angle. I did not go right on the stick at all, but I once again just did a basic trick, and it's going to be a slightly shorter trick than the flip trick like I got on lap 1, but it will give you a little more speed going into the last turn, so just be aware of that. But you can take the last turn as I did previously. My game lagged out, which is why I took that turn so weird, so ignore that. Also beware of these thwomps on lap 3, they can be a bit of a problem. So here is the absolute fastest way of taking the shroom section and the Superman. You want to get that pseudo slip drift as you approach the Superman, and that gets you the MT super fast, and then you can release that MT into a wheelie as you go off the edge. And Enmead has a great video on this track. He goes in great detail onto this track, so I would highly recommend that. And then here on lap 3, I'm just showing you the approach if you're not going to use the rail at all. You just do that trick, you release the MT, and yeah, that's everything about RBC. That's a 234 right there. Well, there you have it. Easy strats on every track in the game. I understand if you are intimidated by some of the times in this video, but I hope it's now clear that easy strategies have much more potential than many players realize. If you enjoyed, all I ask is that you like the video and leave some feedback in the comments down below. If this video performs well, I might consider covering intermediate strategies on every track. That way, if the strats in this video are too easy for you, I can show you what the next step to improving your times would be. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in a couple days for my 2025 timesheet video and for another top secret video that I think you all will enjoy. So, I'll see you all later. Take care.